Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser, and we are almost there. The day before Seahawks training camp begins. We are actually here, if you are counting the players reporting. Today is the official day that players report. We should get some news from around the NFL as well as other teams are reporting. So very curious to find out about a few things in particular that we haven't yet, but one of them being I'm really curious what the Rams are going to look like with their offensive line situation, but don't have all that info yet, so we'll wait until we get it. And also, really excited about hopefully seeing some of you at camp in the next few weeks as the Seahawks and open up training camp to the public as they do every year. And also looking forward to, if you haven't already seen it, tonight at, whoops, let me put this up there. Tonight at 5 o'clock Pacific time, we debut a new Seahawks podcast. It will not be on this channel. It's not my show. It is a show I am part of, but it's called the Seahawks Collective. It is something that's been started across a number of different teams, and we've gathered, I think, a really cool crew of people to have a conversation. We're going to have myself, Rob Staten, Michael Sean Dugar of The Athletic, as well as Annabelle Hasselback. Yes, she is one of Matt's daughters, intern for the Seahawks last year. Got to know her. She's fantastic. She will act as the host of the show, but she won't be on actually for a couple of weeks. So the first two episodes this week and next week will be me hosting, which you guys should be familiar with. But we got a really fun show tonight. Make sure you go to youtube.com at Seahawks Collective. Subscribe to that channel and tune in tonight. Looking forward to the conversation with those guys and really looking forward to when Annabelle joins and I get to be a participant and not the host. So check that out. Should be fun. And, I think one of the things that I look for in any kind of talk show, podcast conversation is I want a good discussion. And I think Mike Dugar, Rob, and I are going to be coming from different places with different points of view and different information. And I think that's hopefully going to lead to some unique content. And I really don't know where it's going to go. And I think that's kind of exciting. So I'm looking forward to that. Make sure you tune in tonight to the Seahawks Collective in our first episode, night before on training camp eve, so to speak. Real Hawk Talk this week. Update there. Evan Hill, Jeff Simmons, and I will be doing Real Hawk Talk. That will come Thursday this week. It will not come on Wednesday. We'll have a ton of content for you tomorrow. I will be at Seahawks training camp. Obviously, we'll do my normal morning show, and then we'll do a post-practice report for sure. So we will have tons of content. Don't you worry about that. Looking forward to all those conversations. The other piece that I wanted to share with you guys before I get into, let me tell you what the show's going to be about today. So the show's going to be this morning, about the reality that we've been talking about Trey Hendrickson, and for a while we're talking about Jalen Ramsey, and we're talking about some of these big names that could be going to the Seahawks if they decided to make a big splash. Well, I kind of was reflecting on this a bit and looking at some of the players that are available as free agents, as well as some of the potential trade targets that are out there, and wanted to, before we get into training camp, do a show where I go through some possible targets for the Seahawks that are not the biggest names. Now, there's going to be two on there that I think do qualify as big names, but haven't been talked about as much. So at least I want to talk about the lesser discussed names and targets for possibly being added to the Seahawks roster. I'll talk about some edge players. I'll talk about some offensive linemen. I'll talk about some wide receivers primarily. Might even talk about a tight end or two. So we'll look at that. And I actually have a pretty long list, a longer list than I expected to have when I started doing this research. So we'll go through some of those names and see, we'll discuss amongst ourselves which of those, if any of them, are a likely possibility. So I'll get to that in a minute. Before I do, with training camp coming, tomorrow, I did my normal annual thing and I created a printable training camp roster with all 90 players. This is up at hawkblogger.com. And you can see here that you can click to, whoops, why is it not? It's not showing. Hold on. Let's try this again. Is it? Oh. There we go. I think I was on the wrong tab. There we go. All right. So you see we've got this clickable tab that will open up in a new window. And if you can't see it, I'll zoom in a little bit. But you've got all 90 players, their numbers, their position, their height, their weight, their age, their experience, their college. And I've got a little note for every single player on the 90-man roster. This is something you're going to want to print out and have with you. Trust me, as someone who's gone to the training camp for many years as a fan and not as a media member, having this, just getting to know the numbers and like you see a guy, it's super valuable. So recommend that. Also, print out like 4 or 5 copies, hand them out to people that are on the shuttle with you on the way to training camp. It's a good way to make some friends. Also, just a nice way to help some other people out. And if you have people going with you that are not hardcore Seahawks fans the way you are, this is a super nice way. Instead of having them ask you every single time, who's that? What's happening there? Give them this handout and they'll be able to do a little self-service looking at those things. So check it out, hawkblogger.com. You'll find it there. Last thing before we get into the task at hand. Want to remind folks that hbtix.com is really got a bunch of great stuff going on right now. We've got so many tickets listed, page after page of tickets listed, and we've got a bunch of 49ers seats available. We've got the 300 level, the 200 level, the 100 level. And, you click on these, you get, in this case, you could see there is a screenshot of the ticket. Now, not a ticket that you can actually use, but just verifying this person has the ticket. You've got the ability to message. In this case, it's Jenkin Young. You can message the seller, send them a note. You can have an idea of how best to do this. You can also check out the person's social media. I'm not going to click on it. You never know what you're going to find there, but do a little research about who you're buying from. And I really, really strongly recommend that you go through this FAQ and recommendations and advice section that I put together about how to do this safely, and also ways that you can protect yourself from fraud or scams or anything like that. So everything you need is up there. All you need to do is go pick which ticket you want, buy the ticket, message the seller, make arrangements, buy the tickets. Let's get every single one of these 49ers seats available and filled with Seahawks fans. So go to hbtix.com, get them while they're hot, because they will start selling as the season starts, really with training camp. These tickets will start getting sold, and let's get them to Seahawks fans. So go over to hbtix.com right now, or maybe right after the show, one of the two. All right, so let's get into the task at hand. Talking about some guys that the Seahawks may be looking to add that are not Trey Hendrickson, or back in the day, TJ Watt or Jalen Ramsey. So I will tell you that there are a few names I'm not going to bring up, and maybe a few positions I'm not going to really get into. And part of that's because I'm just not convinced that that position's a place that the Seahawks are going to go. For example, cornerback. The Seahawks just signed Shaquille Griffin, so I don't really think that they're going to be in the market for another cornerback. There are some interesting names available at that position. Mike Hilton is a interesting nickel corner. Obviously, Rasul Douglas was a guy that the Seahawks had in for a visit. Asante Samuel Jr., very talented player who has had some injury issues. He actually has had if you're wondering why Asante Samuel Jr. who's very young. He's 25, not even 26 yet, and has been a starting corner and a quality corner for the Chargers. Why is he still out there? Well, he has had a stinger issue in his neck. And the reality is, it sounds like it's not going to be something that just goes away. Generally, that leads to, retirement at some point. This is, I think, what got Cam Chancellor in the end. It got some of the other Seahawks players where you have these kind of spine related issues that pinches nerves and you just can't play. So he is going to sign with a team. I don't think it's going to be the Seahawks. I hope it's not going to be the Rams. But who knows? I wouldn't be shocked at all if either the 49ers or the Rams end up being the team that adds Asante Samuel Jr. If you haven't been following that storyline at all, he was really highly linked to the Miami Dolphins. And then Asante Samuel Sr. talked a lot of smack about how the Dolphins are a leaderless team and might have jeopardized his chance of his son actually getting a chance to get a contract with the Dolphins. But, that's just that. So I'm not going to be talking about corners, even though I just did, but that's why I don't think that makes as much sense. So let's talk about a few other positions. There's some obvious ones, and I think edge rusher is the one that's probably the most obvious because Uchenna Nwosu is going to start training camp on PUP, and we just don't know yet. We don't know what the situation is, and we've talked a lot about Trey Hendrickson. So who else is available? Now, the first player I'm going to mention, we're going to go through some free agents before I get into some trade targets. And I'm going to do both in most of these categories, both free agents and both free agents and trade targets. But in this case, why is this so hard? Okay, sorry, trying to get my view updated. In this case, let's start with free agents. And let's start with a guy that has already been a Seahawk and has already been a Raven and is known to Mike Macdonald, known to John Schneider, plays a position that the Seahawks value in edge and has succeeded in Mike Macdonald's defense. Yes, his name is Jadeveon Clowney, and he was released by the Carolina Panthers. He is currently a free agent, and he had 5.5 sacks last year, was not a super productive year, but is a very strong run defender, as well as still an effective pass rusher. His pass rush grade, even last year, was 73. When he played for Mike Macdonald 2 years ago, he had 11 sacks and a 79 pass rush grade. So he had his best year, at least graded from PFS perspective, under Mike Macdonald, other than 1 year back in 2018. So I think that Jadeveon Clowney could make sense for the Seahawks to look at. The issue there is I think he's a little redundant with DeMarcus Lawrence. He is primarily going to be a guy that's an edge setter. He does have, a little bit of pass rush still to his game, but I don't know that he is adding something different than DeMarcus Lawrence. I think he's a little bit redundant there. So familiarity-wise, talent-wise, I think he's still got things to contribute. I think that could make some sense for the Seahawks. Jadeveon Clowney is the first name on my list. The next name on my list is a guy that I think nobody's talked about. And honestly, I'm a little surprised that he is still available as a free agent. This is a guy that has played for how many teams? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams in his career. He was traded last year from Cleveland to Detroit. Had, if I'm looking at this right, I want to make sure I've got this correct, but I think he had double-digit sacks last year. Let me pull it up to make sure I am not crazy. A little short. He had 9 sacks last year, which is more than anyone but Leonard Williams on the Seahawks. And he's 32. He's slowing down a little bit for sure. But Zadarius Smith is a guy that is an edge player. He is a heavier player. So I'm not sure from a fit perspective. He's 6'4", 275 pounds. Now you might say, well, Jadeveon Clowney's huge. Jadeveon Clowney is like 260. He is lighter than that. He has played up to 270, but he's also played as light as 250, 255. So Zadarius Smith is a little bit bigger, but he is a really effective pass rusher. He can pass rush from the outside. He can also pass rush from the interior. And like I said, he had 9 sacks last year and 67 pressures. 67 pressures. That's a lot of pressure. And his pass rush grade was 76. He's not a great run defender. So that's one thing that is not as much in his favor. But, he everywhere he has gone, he has been an effective pass rusher, and he's out there. So he's another guy that they could look to bring in as a vet at this point. So Jadeveon Clowney, Zadarius Smith. Next guy is another Smith on the list. And this guy, I'm personally not quite as high on. I think he might be tapped, but he is 6'5", 265 pounds. His name is Preston Smith. He played for a long time with the Green Bay Packers, had some of his best years there. Went to Pittsburgh last year, had 5 sacks, had only 18 pressures total last year, but had been a double-digit sack guy in 2022 and 2023. So I think there is, some potential that they look at him as a guy that even at age 32, about to turn 33, maybe there's a little bit left in the tank that they'd want to kick around. I think this one feels like a stretch to me of being a good fit for like what they'd want. This feels a little Trevis Gibson like. I'm not saying he's had the same career as Trevis Gibson. He obviously has been much, much better, but I don't know that he's a guy that would get snaps if he came here, at least at this point. And Jadeveon Clowney, Zadarius Smith would 100% get snaps if they were brought into Seattle. So those are 3 edge players. Those are 3 free agent edge players. And there's some other free agent edges out there that, I don't know if you're interested in some of these guys, there's really not that many other that I would bring up as making a lot of sense for the Seahawks as defensive ends. Now, there are a couple of trade targets, and one of them is, I'm just going to mention his name because he even sees the Seahawks as his top potential destination if he were to be traded. I think there is 0.0% chance that this happens. Micah Parsons. Yes, Micah Parsons played for Aden Dirty in Dallas, loves Aden Dirty, has spoken glowingly about him, has talked about the Seahawks being where he'd go potentially if he wasn't in Dallas. I just don't see it. I don't see the Cowboys trading him. I don't see the Seahawks, giving up what would be required. But I'm going to mention him because sure, someone certainly, if I didn't say it, would be like, didn't you see the Micah Parsons talked about the Seahawks? Well, I don't think that that's going to happen. But yes, so Micah Parsons. But here is a name that I'm going to put this out there as maybe the most likely. All right. And we talked about it a long time ago, but we haven't talked about it since. His name, well, before I give you the name, he is going into the last year of his rookie deal, just like Charles Cross. He was from the same draft class. He has had some real success as a pass rusher, and his team just drafted the best edge pass rusher in the draft to add to a group that's already stacked. His name's Kayvon Thibodeau. Kayvon Thibodeau is a guy that, had double-digit sacks 2 years ago. And I think very realistically, going into the final year of his rookie deal, could be had in a trade. He's still young, obviously. He's 24 years old. He had 11 and a half sacks 2 years ago. He had 5.5 last year. With them, with the Giants having the stack of edge rushers, they've already got Brian Burns. They obviously spent a big draft pick on that position as well. And when you add Abdul Carter to Brian Burns, there's just not going to be as many snaps. Now, it's a great rotation, but I think that's a guy that the Seahawks could potentially make an offer for and actually bring in. If I was to make a bet, if they're going to add an edge rusher, this is the guy I think they're going to add. Now, the other vet free agent addition I mentioned, I was trying to remember, is Matt Judon. He's available. He's super, he's pretty spent. Also a really suspect run defender. So between all these edge guys that I brought up, I think Jadeveon Clowney and Kayvon Thibodeau are the most likely. I believe Thibodeau is the highest potential out of all of those. So keep an eye on that space. So that's edge, but that's not the only place that's not the only place that the Seahawks have needs. The other position for me that I still have as a high need area is wide receiver. It is probably the position group I am most concerned about. While everyone else in the world is going to be worried about the Seahawks offensive line, we're going to talk about that as well, but wide receiver is mine. And where there's need is kind of someone who is a playmaker, someone who's dynamic, someone ideally who could play the X position, maybe they stretch the field. Now, yes, they have Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Yes, Cody White's a guy that I like and could step forward. But there's question marks there. So there's a few free agents that kind of fit the bill. Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis is a guy that absolutely plays the X position, is a field stretcher, has historically been somebody who makes big plays down the field, and he was released after 1 year in Jacksonville. He signed a big deal with Jacksonville. This is a guy that's scored 29 touchdowns in his 5 seasons, had scored at least 7 touchdowns in 3 of his first 4 years with the Bills, has averaged over 16 yards a catch. Now, there is word he's already meeting with the Giants, potentially reunite with Brian Dable, who coached, OC'd him in Buffalo. He could go back to Buffalo. There's a lot of places that are interested in Gabe Davis. He's just 26 years old. He's 6'2", 225 pounds. To me, this is a guy the Seahawks should be looking to bring in. I really believe that. Now, if they bring him in and, he's not the best player, fine. But for me, this seems like a hand in glove fit of someone who is a big play guy down the field. And as far as being a contested catcher, he's been okay in that regard. Has not been as good as I recall. He had 1 year where he was a 77% contested catcher, but he's generally been a 50% or less contested catcher. And he has had some issues with drops. So Gabe Davis is a guy that fits the bill, is a free agent. All you'd have to give him is money. Amari Cooper is the other name that people are going to bring up. Now, Amari Cooper's 31. He's at a different stage of his career, has been an X receiver as well, has been a guy that, gets deeper down the field, has, just in 2023, he averaged 17 yards per catch, had 1,300 yards receiving and 5 touchdowns. So it's not that far removed from being a productive player. Now, he got traded to Buffalo last year and really didn't do much for the Bills, was not a good fit there. But he's somebody who has been a good contested catcher, was a 65% contested catcher last year, has had pretty good hands, decent route runner. I don't think he's not the Amari Cooper of old because he is old, but Amari Cooper could be a guy the Seahawks decide would make some sense to bring in. Now, I think the Seahawks are going to want to get some eyes on Torrey Horton before they decide to block him or someone else with a veteran. But Torrey Horton is also not a classic X receiver. He's more of a flanker, more of a guy that's just going to be a shifty route runner. And so I don't know if, it's really to me about how they feel about MVS and how they feel about Cody White. Those are their primary X options. Yes, they've talked about Elijah Arroyo having and looking like an X receiver, but he's not an X receiver. He's a tight end. So that's not how they're going to use him. So Amari Cooper is a name to watch. Now, there's a few other free agents I will go through, but let me just stick to one. DJ Chark is a guy that is a free agent, and I don't think he necessarily makes the most sense, but he is 6'4", 200 pounds, has the X body type. Was a speedy player, has had some years where, his yards per reception, he has been 17. He had 1 year where, he only played a little bit, but he had a 22 average yard per reception. He is a guy that can be a big play receiver. Now, he's never been that productive. He had 1 year where he had 1,000 yards receiving back in 2019. Really just hasn't done much since then. So I don't think this one's as likely, but when you're 6'4" and you got 4.3 speed, or at least you used to, you're going to get a lot of chances. He's still only 28 years old. So he's a name that could be an option for the Seahawks a little bit later. He's also a guy that, has been discussed with a number of teams, whether it's the Chiefs, the Chargers, other places. Okay, so those are the free agents. Let's talk about trade targets, because the trade targets for a wide receiver are actually pretty interesting. And I think these are realistic. I'll start with the one that I don't think is realistic after I say that, and then we'll get into some more of the realistic ones. So everyone wants to hear about Terry McLaurin. Scary Terry for the Commanders. Love that player. He is amazing. He's not an X receiver. Doesn't really matter when you're that good. You can always find a place for a receiver that good. Terry McLaurin is older, so he is a guy that is already, he's going to be playing in his age 30 season. He wants a huge deal, and that's why he's potentially available. He had over 1,300 yards last year, 96 catches. I cannot see a situation where the Seahawks give up what's necessary to trade for a 30-year-old receiver who is not an X and then pay him. I know people are excited about it. I just don't see it. So sorry to, rain on your parade, but I don't think that one's going to happen. But let's talk about some ones that might. Top of that list, Romeo Doubs. Romeo Doubs is a receiver for the Green Bay Packers, and he, like all the other 2022 draft picks, is in the final year of his deal. The Packers drafted 2 wide receivers, I think Matthew Golden and Savion Williams. They already have a pretty full wide receiver room. Now, Christian Watson would be on this list for me, but he tore his ACL at the end of last year. I don't think he's going to be available. But Romeo Doubs, I think, will be. And that's a guy that I think the Seahawks could have interest in. John Schneider has obvious ties to Green Bay. And Doubs is 6'2", 204 pounds. He's not a classic X receiver, but he's got size. He has been a good contested catcher. He caught 67% of his contested catches last year. He is a guy that can make big plays, but he's also someone who is pretty shifty and gets a lot of screen passes and can do yards after catch kinds of things. So he has been a wide out. He's not a slot guy. So he would be someone who fits outside, unlike JSN and Cooper Kupp, who, while they can play outside, have predominantly been slot receivers. So Romeo Doubs is a guy that to me would make a ton of sense for the Seahawks to add to that crew. I think he has different skill sets. I think he's got a different body type. Even if you kept MVS, I think Romeo Doubs, it could be Romeo Doubs or Jake Bobo. Like, that could be a question. Now, I love Jake Bobo, and I know a lot of folks do, and Jake Bobo brings different things to the table. But Romeo Doubs is a more dynamic player, at least has been to this point in his career, than Jake Bobo has been. Now, he had, what was it, 600 yards last year and 4 touchdowns, missed some time, a little bit of a malcontent, felt like he should have been getting the ball more. 2023, he had 900 yards, 9 touchdowns. So he's had 16 touchdowns in 3 years. He's been a playmaker. So I think this is a guy that nobody's talking about for the Seahawks that I think could be a Seahawk down the line. So keep an eye on Romeo Doubs. Another name that should have some familiarity from that draft class. So Quentin Johnston. Now, I think it's probably a little bit less likely now that the Chargers saw Mike Williams retire. But Quentin Johnston was a first-round pick, and he's been an absolute bust for them. Absolute bust. But he is 6'3", 215 pounds, and he's 23 years old. Depending on what was the trade, what they were looking for in a trade, this could be a guy. I mean, I don't think the Chargers are enamored with him. I don't think they're going to say he is in the last year of his deal. If the Chargers think that they're better off getting something in trade than keeping him, that could happen. I would not be super excited about this. This is a guy that's had massive problems with drops. He has been a 30% contested catcher. If you can believe it, he's worse at contested catches than DK Metcalf has been over his career. He's, again, one of those has the size but doesn't play to the size kind of player. I'm just not a big fan of his game. But I had to put him on this list because he is a young, former first-round pick who's in the last year of his deal, who has the X receiver build. So you've got to at least put him on the list of possible targets for the Seahawks. I'll leave it at that. Now, I can give you 2 more names. One of them is going to be someone you might be excited about, someone that you will certainly not. Which do you want first? I'll give you the one that you're not going to be excited about first. Let's talk about another former high draft pick who plays for the Tennessee Titans. He was also drafted in the first round in 2022 by the Titans. His name's Treylon Burks. After they traded away A.J. Brown, this was the guy that they thought was going to be his replacement. He's 6'2", 225 pounds. He's only 25 years old, and he has been an absolute bust so far in the NFL. His best season was his rookie year when he had 440 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. He has not caught a touchdown since. 0 touchdowns in each of the last 2 seasons. He had only 4 receptions last year because I think he was hurt. He had 16 receptions the year before. Some of that is who's throwing it to him, but come on. This is not good. This is not encouraging. But the Titans do have a lot of receivers. We know that they signed Tyler Lockett, but they also, brought in a bunch of other guys. It's actually a crowded room, and it may not be the most talented room, but it's a crowded room. And this is a former first round pick who's young, 6'2", 225 pounds. Could the Seahawks decide that they want to see what he has to offer? Sure. And keep in mind, we're talking about trade targets. The cost of these different players is wildly different. The cost of acquiring Terry McLaurin is not anything close to the cost of acquiring Treylon Burks. So you might not be giving up much to get a guy that was picked in the first round just a few years ago. But I think he is worth watching as someone that the Seahawks could decide to bring in and add to the pile at the X receiver spot. Last guy I'll say at the receiver position that I will put in the unlikely bucket, but there's enough there that I felt like he belonged. He is a former teammate of Jackson Smith and Jigba. His name is Chris Olave. Now, Chris Olave is plays for the Saints, and so Clint Kubiak knows him well. Obviously, JSN knows and is very close to him. They're really close. Olave has been one of the best receivers in the NFL when he has been on the field. He has dealt with a number of concussions. And so there is some risk with him. And he is entering, this is the last year of his deal. So the Saints may be looking at this thinking, do we want to give this guy with the concussions a huge deal? Do we wait till after the season? Do we take something and trade? All those are possibilities. I think they're going to keep him almost certainly, but it's worth at least bringing him up because he's got a little bit of this injury issue and because he's in the final year of his deal. When he's been healthy, I mean, he had 1,100 yards in 2023 and 5 touchdowns. He had 1,000 yards as a rookie and 4 touchdowns. Was, in the conversation for Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's an excellent receiver, excellent route runner. He is not a classic X. He's 6 foot, 190 pounds, but he can play in any offense you need him to. So I think Olave, obviously he'd know the Kubiak system. The coaches would know him in that regard. JSN would know him. There's a chance. I think it's pretty unlikely, but I think he belongs on a list of possible trade targets for the Seahawks. So those are the receivers: Gabe Davis, Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, DJ Shark, Chris Olave, Treylon Burks, Romeo Doubs, Quentin Johnson. Out of that group, Romeo Doubs feels like the most likely potential addition at some point. I think Gabe Davis, to me, makes a ton of sense. What I will say is Gabe Davis is what I think Cody White's ceiling looks like. I think Cody White has a similar body type, is a similar type of player. And so they might feel like they've already got Gabe Davis in-house. But that would be my best guess is Romeo Doubs in terms of, I think he'll be available for a trade. I don't think the cost will be prohibitive. And I think he adds a dynamic aspect to this receiving core that is a little different than the other guys. But I think if Torrey Horton Jr. really stands out, then I think Romeo Doubs becomes unnecessary. So that's they might be waiting to see on that. All right, 2 more position groups I want to touch on before I let you go for at least a little bit. Let's talk about offensive line. So I don't think the Seahawks are really looking for more offensive linemen. I know Seahawks fans might want them to be, and outside parties might want them to be. And the reality is they wanted a veteran interior lineman. They never added one. They wanted Will Fries. They couldn't get him. John Schneider talked about looking at trade targets, and there was guys that they were interested in. They didn't make a trade. So I think that they're probably monitoring this still. But let's talk about 4 guys that are free agents, 1 guy that's a potential trade target. There's probably more on this list than I'm going to provide, but these are guys that at least I wanted to offer. So let's start with a trade target. This is also probably unlikely, but I think it's likely enough that it made it through my filter of we should mention this guy. He was drafted in the 2022 draft as well. He's in the final year of his deal, and he was taken by the Saints. His name was Trevor Penning, is Trevor Penning. He was drafted 19th overall, and he's played right tackle, but he is now moving to guard. I think guard is the better position for Trevor Penning. John Benton knows him. Clint Kubiak knows him. He knows this offense. He's just 26. And like I said, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. So I think he at least merits some consideration as a guy that, a veteran player who knows the system they could just plug in. And if they really don't like what they're seeing at right guard, maybe they give up enough to get him. I don't think he's a particularly great player, but he is a pretty good run blocker. So let's see. I think it's unlikely, but just wanted to offer that. All right. Free agents. Now, this is a guy I've loved since he came out of college. And I think the only reason he's still available as a free agent is he's recovering from a pretty serious knee injury. And maybe it's going to take longer for him to get ready. But Will Hernandez is still out there as a free agent. He is a really good vet guard, a good run blocker, a good pass protector. My best bet is he's just going to eventually re-sign with the Cardinals at some point. But this guy would be a really intriguing addition. If he passes your physicals, like there's no question he stands alone in this list. He is a good player. So that would be the number one choice if he passes a physical. I'd be excited as a Seahawks fan if they added Will Hernandez. It would immediately upgrade the floor of this offensive line in a way that none of these other guys would. But you still have to find out where he is physically. The other three guys, I don't love any of these names, but I'm going to name them because it's possible. I'm not here to tell you who I want them to add. I'm here to tell you who they might. So next on that list, Dalton Risner. Dalton Risner, veteran guard, played for the Vikings last year. He is still talking with teams about who he might join. So he's still going to play. He's not going to retire. He's a fine depth guy. You don't want him as your starter, but he's out there and could be someone that the team looks at. The other two, Brandon Scherf is a guy that everyone talks about. He's pretty old and he's in pretty serious decline. He's 34. I think he's going to retire. I don't think he's officially done it, but I'll at least mention him as someone else that they could potentially look at. I think it's pretty unlikely, but could. Now, this one, I'm kind of trolling you, but I have to mention it because the reality is John Schneider drafted him. And I think he's even mentioned him this offseason in a way of like, hey, he's kind of better than people realize. Germain Ifedi. Germain Ifedi is a free agent. It gives me no pleasure to say his name as a potential Seahawks target. But if they're looking for a vet who can play inside and they've got familiarity with, it would not shock me if John Schneider was like, hey, let's do what we did with George Fant last year and bring you back. And I don't think it would give me much confidence that it changes the trajectory of that line. It might even do the opposite, but I had to include it on the list because I think John Schneider sees Germain Ifedi differently than probably fans see Germain Ifedi. All right, so those are the offensive linemen I wanted to touch on. The last position, there's a couple names I have to mention. It's not, I don't think, a position of need, but the Seahawks may see it differently. I don't know. They just let Noah Fant go, right? They just let Noah Fant go. So there's a guy down in Las Vegas who's a former, second round pick and a highly thought of tight end. His name's Michael Mayer. And with Brock Bowers emerging to be the player he has been, Michael Mayer's got to be available at a reasonable price. And he's a guy that the Seahawks could decide would be like, if you had Michael Mayer, Elijah Arroyo, and AJ Barner as your top three tight ends, that's a really talented young tight end room. You could run a lot of 2 tight end sets with. I think that would be a really good blend of talent and skill sets. I don't think it's crazy that the Seahawks are like, yeah, let's add another young talented tight end to our group. So I had to mention him. I don't think it's the most likely place that they're looking to add, but I think it would make some sense. And while I was at the tight end room, I had to look at there's another guy out there that I don't think that the Seahawks are going to go after. And I'm not sure the Falcons are going to really look to trade him. Kyle Pitts, yes. Incredibly dynamic athlete who has been super underwhelming as a pro. I think that they want him around for Michael Penix and this year. I don't think the Seahawks are looking to add a player like Michael Pitts or Kyle Pitts. Did I say Michael Pitts? Michael Mayer and Kyle Pitts. I think what you get with Kyle Pitts is a lot of redundancy with Elijah Arroyo, and I'm not sure they're looking to block Elijah Arroyo in that regard. So I have to mention him because I think there's rumors that he's available in a trade. It's possible the Seahawks could look there, but I don't think that's the most likely outcome. So as we kind of, yes, we could talk about nose tackle, but I just don't know that there's a nose tackle that I was looking around that jumps out to me, to be honest. There just isn't. Andrew Billings, maybe for the Bears. I don't know if he really fits the bill. No pun intended. There's just not a guy that jumped out to me. Now, Jordan Davis for the Eagles, he's in the last year of his deal. Maybe. I don't know. Like, I just didn't see a guy that jumped out to me in that way. Doesn't mean they won't do it, but I didn't see someone. There are some inside linebackers that could make some sense, but for now, the way I look at it, I think that edge is probably the most likely place that they would add somebody. I think offensive line and receiver are possibilities. And if I was to say, give me your best bet out of each position for edge, I would say Kayvon Thibodeau. I wouldn't say I'll be surprised if they don't make that move, but that's the one that's got my attention the most. 2, wide receiver. Romeo Doubs is the guy that I think makes the most sense, at least from the current additions. Right behind him would be Gabe Davis. Those two make a lot of sense. Gabe Davis, you just have to give money to. And I mean, he really fits the X position well. And then offensive line, I mean, I don't know if it's the most likely, but Will Hernandez would be the best option. If he's healthy, there's no question he would be the best option. So those are the guys. And then tight end, Michael Mayer, that's just a throw in. Like, if you can have a chance to add a good young player, you just do it. The Seahawks didn't necessarily need Julian Love when they added him and were surprised he was still available in free agency. That's worked out pretty well. Some of these moments where they just add a player because they're available and they're a good, young, talented player has worked out well. So I think Michael Mayer fits into that category. So those are that's my list. That's my list. It's a good list, I think. Hopefully, like a lot of those names, I listen to a lot of Seahawks content. I haven't heard those names pretty much anywhere, most of those names. And so hopefully it gives you something to think about. Again, tonight at 5:00 Pacific time, we will have the first episode of Seahawks Collective with myself, Rob Staten, and Michael Sean Dugar. And then in a few weeks, Annabelle Hasselback will join the crew. She will host tonight. I will host. So that'll be a fun conversation tonight. We've got a lot of good conversation to have there. Real Hawk Talk will be Thursday this week, 6:00. So keep an eye on that. Tomorrow is the start of training camp. I will be with you in the morning. I'll be with you for a post-practice report. We'll have press conferences, all the good stuff. And if you haven't already subscribed as a club level or higher YouTube member, now is the time to do it, because that's where you will get instant access to player interviews as soon as I post them, as opposed to having to wait. You can also go to patreon.com/hawkblogger, sign up, get ad-free audio of this show every day, as well as access to the Discord channel and verified over on hbtix.com. All right, folks. Can't wait to have more Seahawks content to talk about with all of you. Looking forward to it until 5 o'clock tonight, maybe earlier, depending on what happens. I'm Brian Hemhauser. This has been another episode of Hawk Blog Mornings. Take care, y'all.